How will I be cued?
Trump often tweets.
How do I pronounce Cynthia's last name?
Betubiza?
Thank you.
January. What are those tweets?
Can
Betubiza.
I'm just I don't necessarily need to be cued. I was just wondering how that works. So I say my piece, it plays, and then I hear it in here, and then I go. Okay, then I'm good.
And Bianca starts the show, right? Bianca starts the show.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
Is my levels okay? I feel like it's loud.
Yeah,
Maybe
it
double
sounds
check.
really hot.
Can I adjust it here?
Yeah.
Hello? 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 Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Oh my god.
I know I really want to call. No, I'm good. I'm good.
Cool.
Okay.
I got it. Here, I'm gonna close the door.
Oh my god!
You have
The
you have
state of New
weather
York is
live on
preparing.
your phone.
I'm sorry?
In case we have to fill air, you have the weather.
Oh, God. I have the weather.
Former campaign chairman.
I'm going to put
Okay.
Should I put my phone on silent? If anyone needs me, they tell me on the mics, right?
Silent. Can you guys
Okay.
hear me?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Okay, 45 seconds. I'm going to take my sweater off. Everybody in the room needed to know that. Okay. We don't play the billboard.
Can you? Okay. Oh my god.
Okay, good luck, guys.
You're listening to Uptown Radio. It's Friday, February 22nd. I'm Maddie Foley.
And I'm Moira Warburton.
E-bikes might become legal in New York City thanks to new legislation. The only catch? They have to be slower.
I hope the city and the mayor don't cut off our legs, because to prohibit electric bikes would be like cutting off our legs.
Some students whose first language isn't English are being put in special ed classes, but they might not actually belong there.
The really tricky question is it a cognitive disability in the mind, or is it just a language acquisition problem?
Special education administrators say placing these students in these programs could have long-term consequences.
Voters usually vote along party lines, but in next Tuesday's election for public advocate, they'll have to make their decision based on just a few words.
My party line is no more delays.
All that and more on Uptown Radio. But first, the news.
Now, some troops are staying in Syria after all. And no host, no best popular film category, and 4 awards happening during the commercial breaks. What's up with the Oscars? We'll find out after news headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Robert Kelly, the Grammy-winning singer known as R. Kelly, is charged with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse involving 4 minors. In Chicago, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx laid out the punishment Kelly faces if convicted.
Aggravated criminal sexual abuse is a Class 2 felony with a sentencing range of 3 to 7 years for a count. It is also probationable. We anticipate that Mr. Kelly will appear in bond court tomorrow afternoon.
The crimes were allegedly carried out between 1998 and as recently as a few years ago. One of the most prominent figures in pro football is facing charges of soliciting prostitution. New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft is one of more than 24 people charged in connection with a suspected human trafficking sex ring in Palm Beach County. Katie Switolski of member station WLRN in Florida reports.
The charges come just weeks after Kraft's team won its 6th Super Bowl. At an outdoor press conference, lead investigator Andrew Sharp told reporters that there is video evidence against Kraft.
The video that we obtained It shows the act that took place.
Jupiter Police Chief Daniel Kerr says the month-long investigation used hidden cameras to uncover the prostitution scheme going on in day spas.
We're as equally stunned as everybody else, or, notoriety that would be arrested.
Police suspect that the operation involves human trafficking. Kerr says their primary focus now is on helping any victims of criminal exploitation. For NPR News, I'm Katie Switulski in Fort Lauderdale.
A senior administration official tells NPR that approximately 400 troops will remain in Syria, doubling the number announced last night in a statement by White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Roughly 200 American troops will remain in the Syrian town of Al-Tanf near the border with Iraq. Their mission is to counter Iran and support U.S. forces in Iraq. An additional 200 will remain in northern Syria. A Texas Democrat with support from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is taking the next step in challenging President Trump's national emergency declaration to fund a wall on the U.S. southern border. Texas Public Radio's Ryan Poppy has more.
Congressman Joaquin Castro filed House Joint Resolution 46, giving Congress the opportunity to terminate the president's national emergency declaration, which Castro says, if allowed to stand, could directly impact his hometown of San Antonio, better known as Military City, USA.
The president's emergency declaration, one of the pots of money would be taken from military construction projects.
Castro, during his call with reporters, was joined by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who said the president's order threatens the Constitution's separation of powers. She hopes to bring the joint resolution up for a vote before the full House on Tuesday. For NPR News, I'm Ryan Poppy in Austin.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Allie Swenson. The state of New York is preparing to criminally charge Paul Manafort if the president pardons his former campaign chairman. Manafort is scheduled for federal sentencing next month for tax and bank fraud. Governor Andrew Cuomo made his first public comments today on the collapse of New York City's deal with Amazon.
What happened is the greatest tragedy that I have seen since I have been in government.
As a guest on Northeast Public Radio, he blamed state senators for the deal falling apart. Senate Democrats say Cuomo is attempting to divide their party. Members of a civil rights organization are protesting outside the Gucci flagship store in Manhattan this afternoon. The National Action Network says it wants to hold the luxury brand accountable. Last week, Gucci was accused of racism for a sweater that critics said resembled blackface. Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman is asking for a new trial. Guzman was convicted last week on a litany of drug and conspiracy charges. A lawyer for Guzman says his client wants the new trial because of reports that the jury had been tainted. One of the jurors told Vice News that they had read media coverage during the trial. The National Transportation Safety Board yesterday released the results of an investigation into a 2017 charter bus crash in Queens. The bus ran a red light and hit a city bus, killing 3 people. According to the safety board, a thermos falling near the brake pedal may be to blame. A tanker truck crashed this morning on a New Jersey highway, spilling thousands of gallons of fuel. Local businesses had to be evacuated. Officials say parts of Route 9 will be closed through the afternoon. An 8-month-old baby is safe today after her stroller rolled onto the subway tracks at 72nd Street and Broadway. A subway operator spotted the rogue stroller on the tracks yesterday and notified authorities to stop trains. The baby is reportedly fine with just a bump on her head. Later in our show, we'll have more on how lawmakers want to make subways safer. Mayor Bill de Blasio will travel to meet and greet appearances in Iowa this weekend. The trip is further stoking suspicions that he could announce a 2020 presidential run. It's 44 degrees and sunny in Central Park. Colder temps are expected tomorrow with rain in the forecast Sunday. The L train will be partially out of service from Friday night to Monday morning, but will run as usual between Broadway Junction and Canarsie. For Columbia Radio News, I'm Allie Swenson.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Moira Warburton.
And I'm Maddie Foley. If you've ever placed an order on Seamless or Grubhub, chances are you've employed one of the 50,000 food delivery cyclists working in New York City. To make those deliveries, they ride a kind of electric bike that's caused a lot of controversy. Delivery guys consider them essential. Many New Yorkers fear them on the street. Hannah Critchfield has more.
It's 32 degrees on the Upper West Side. Miguel Flores is about to ride 46 blocks to deliver a bowl of noodles, shrimp marinara to be exact. He hops on his e-bike to take off. 20 minutes later, he knocks on the door drops off the food, and gets a $4 tip.
Hello, lady. How are you? This is food delivery. Karmas. Open door, please, downstairs.
Most delivery cyclists are recent immigrants. Miguel's from Lima, Peru. Almost all delivery cyclists' income is from tips, not the restaurants. So they ride the fastest bike they can. They're called throttle bikes, bikes with an electric motor. They go 28 miles per hour, and they're also illegal. Steve Vaccaro's a lawyer for bicyclist and pedestrian rights. He says the faster cyclists go, the more money they make.
They're not getting paid anything by the restaurant. So delivery customers are in fact incentivizing the delivery cyclists to cut corners by tipping them less when the food arrives cold or not as fast as they would like.
With the rise of app-based delivery services, the number of cyclists using the bikes has exploded in the last few years. And with them come rising safety concerns. On Tuesday, Mayor de Blasio held a press conference on Vision Zero and street safety, and particularly focused on e-bikes.
We are going to be enforcing on anybody who we think puts other people in danger, period. So if an officer observes a cyclist doing something they regard as dangerous and illegal, of course they're going to ticket them.
The city penalties are tough. Today, police can confiscate throttle bikes and fine cyclists up to $500. It's hard to say whether the bikes are actually a hazard for pedestrians because the statistics are limited. To date, there have been no recorded deaths caused by an e-bike.
You see these things whizzing by. It is understandable that some people are going to be a little nervous about them.
That's Jonah Alone, press secretary for Councilmember Rafael Espinal Jr. Espinal is one of the sponsors of a bill package that's hoping to address the problem. The proposed legislation would legalize throttle bikes, but limit their speed up to 15 miles per hour. The city would also help subsidize the cost of converting the bikes to the new standards.
So establishing a conversion program that would assist people, in a certain income bracket, a certain level below the poverty line, help them make sure that their motor is sort of in compliance with city and state traffic law.
Back on the job, Miguel Flores drops off his last delivery of Italian food at 7 p.m. It's been a slow day.
I hope this law passes, and I think it will. I hope the city and the mayor don't cut off our legs, because to prohibit electric bikes would be like cutting off our legs.
He might not have to wait long. The sponsors hope to bring the e-bike legislation to vote by summer. Hannah Critchfield, Columbia Radio News.
So yesterday, the New York City Comptroller's Office released a report, and the report found that ICE activity in New York has gone up by a lot in the last 2 years. Earlier today, I spoke with Randy Capps, who's the Director of Research for U.S. Programs at the Migration Policy Institute, to understand a little bit of the context behind those numbers. So thank you very much for joining me this morning, Mr. Capps. So why do you think New York City has seen such a significant increase in ICE activity in New York, if indeed you think it has seen the level of increase that this report says it has?
Yeah, so the Comptroller's report shows a really dramatic increase in arrests and deportations out of the New York field office, but that's from a very low level. And New York's field office still has one of the smallest numbers of arrests of the field offices in the country, particularly for a very large city.
What should we take away from these numbers?
Well, New York used to have far more arrests, like some other parts of the country, such as California and Chicago, that have put limits on ICE cooperation. And essentially, these limits mean it's much harder for ICE to get people directly out of the jails in the city. Those limitations remain in place, which has kept the overall numbers down, but at the same time, ICE has increased its activity in arrests in the community quite a bit. And I would add the reason why that's important is because it's still true that nationwide, 3/4 of all the arrests are of people who've already been arrested and booked into local jail. Only 1/4 of the arrests nationwide come from community arrests by ICE officers, but it's the reverse in New York City. In New York City, 3/4 of all the arrests are actually done in the community, and only 1/4 of them come directly out of the jails. And that's a sign that the sanctuary policies of New York are keeping the overall numbers down.
Mm-hmm. So what does the increased activity mean for people living in a sanctuary city like New York?
Well, New York, like California and Chicago, the odds of being arrested by ICE are a lot lower than in a place that fully cooperates, like, say, Texas or the states of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. But it doesn't mean that those odds are as low as they used to be in the Obama administration, because ICE has been conducting more of these operations and arrests in the community.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the data behind this report. Are you satisfied with how they collected the data? What would you have done differently if you'd been writing the report?
I think the way that they show the increase in the arrests coming out of New York City's ICE office makes sense in terms of a percentage, but I would have liked to also have seen an acknowledgement that the numbers are really low relative to other major cities or other field offices in major cities. And I would have liked to have seen some acknowledgement that, relative to the size of the unauthorized population in the city, which is really large, that the risk of being arrested there is still lower than it is in a lot of other places in the country. That would be one thing. The second thing is I'm not sure the removals or the deportations out of New York field office necessarily are a good indicator of local enforcement, because people get moved all over the country. And my understanding is that those removals or deportations are of people who were in custody in ICE, detention facilities in the New York area, but they could have been arrested in another part of the country, or even some of them at the border.
Thank you very much for chatting with me today. This was really informative.
Sure. You're very welcome.
I was really drunk with my friends one time, and we went to get pizza. I walked out and I was holding my pizza, and I was just like so excited, and I was like about to take a big old bite, and a homeless person approached me and palmed my slice of pizza.
Sophia Casoros, a New York City local and pizza enthusiast who spends most weekends hanging out in East Village.
He just gently just put it on my slice of pizza. Like, not hard so that it would fall, just touched it, and I was like, well, that's ruined, so I guess that's yours now. It was like a really good tactic. My friends were laughing so hard that one of them dropped her slice of pizza, so he took that too, and then he insisted on waiting in line with me. And then I ended up befriending him. His name was Jerry. I remember that vividly.
You're listening to Columbia Radio News, online Fridays at 4.
Tenants from across the city, as well as elected officials, gathered at Columbus Circle today. They were protesting a regulation that allows landlords to pass on some building costs to tenants in rent-controlled apartments. Sophia Amati reports.
Anita Long was one of the protesters at Columbus Circle today. She's a senior citizen, and she's been living in her apartment in the Bronx for 29 years.
I love my apartment. I love my neighborhood.
Long's apartment is rent stabilized. A few years ago, her landlord told her he would be making some improvements.
I'm going to put in a new elevator, new bathroom, new kitchen. I thought it was great.
But several months later, Long received a letter from the state's Department of Home and Community Renewal, telling her that her landlord had requested a rent increase. He wanted another $115 a month extra for the repairs. Even though Long lives in a rent-stabilized apartment, under the MCI or Major Capital Improvement Program, her landlord can increase her rent. The MCI program was introduced back in the 70s. It was supposed to serve as an incentive for landlords to carry out routine property maintenance, like replacing faulty boilers and roofs. But now, landlords are being accused of exploiting the system to increase rent. Senator Michael Gianaris is one of several lawmakers who want to change this. Gianaris introduced legislation that would eliminate rent increases as a result of MCIs, and, if passed, would also roll back existing increases.
The MCI program is out of control, and it has been hurting tenants throughout this city year after year. The biggest crisis we have in New York is a housing crisis. People cannot afford to live here anymore. People are getting priced out of their homes.
Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz is another lawmaker standing behind the bill. She says that the MCI program is serving the pockets of multinational corporate landlords.
There's another mom-and-pop landlords. These are the corporate, Trump-like, Zara-like landlords that are using this to allegedly fix the front of the building, but instead are using it to become richer.
Senator Jessica Ramos was also at the rally, And she says that these MCIs are exasperating the affordable housing crisis.
Money doesn't just disappear just like it doesn't grow on trees. And for a long time, working class New Yorkers have been squeezed like a lemon for every single drop.
Since 1997, the city has lost over 280,000 rent-stabilized apartments. And, according to a state report, over 50% of New York City renters pay more than a third of their income in rent today. Anita Long is worried she's going to be priced out of her apartment. She's just been notified about another MCI that would cost her an extra $80 a month.
Now, if we can't afford it, then how many homeless senior citizens are you going to actually be seeing in the streets of New York?
Sophia Ahmadi, Columbia Radio News.
So New York City has the largest school system in the country. That's just over 1 million students. It's also one of the most diverse, and some schools may not be equipped to provide these non-native English speakers with the support that they need. Now the Department of Education is exploring the problem and hoping to find a solution. Reporter Alex Coletta tells us more.
When a kid starts school, the school asks the parent what language they speak at home. If it's anything other than English, the student takes an English proficiency test. And if they do poorly, they get designated as an English language learner. If they don't make progress in learning English, they're often classified as having a disability and referred to special education. And that's a big problem, according to Chris Taharli, a special education administrator in East Harlem.
The really tricky question is it a learning, a cognitive disability in the mind, or is it just a language acquisition problem, or challenge, rather, because it takes years to become really fluent and immersed in the language.
More than a third of all English language learners are receiving special education, and he says they may not all belong in special ed.
Are these students being tested in their native language, or are they being given an English a test in English or a battery of tests in English and then performing poorly?
Taharli says that being misclassified as a special ed student can have long-term implications.
The graduation rates once you get to high school are about 8 or 9%. So the dropouts rates are, I mean, it's just a really abysmal kind of picture. And so those kids they're at risk for job security, just having a better quality of life.
Every student referred to special education gets an individualized education plan, or IEP. Special ed instructor Ashley Tyree has been teaching kindergarten through 2nd grade for the last 4 years. She's convinced that some schools refer students who really don't need special education.
I have colleagues who work in other schools, and they can absolutely 100% say that some of the students who have IEPs don't need it because they just were English language learners.
Tyree says that at the school where she works, they have multilingual teachers who can speak with parents and test the kids in their native language. And that's helped them reduce the number of students misplaced into special ed. But she says many schools don't have the staff or the resources to follow these protocols.
For other schools who haven't caught up with some of the protocols and are still running things the same way they have been for the past 10 years, they're seeing that difference.
Taharli agrees they need more bilingual teachers, but he says
it's very difficult to find people who are qualified to administer those tests, but then also analyze the data. Across the board, there's a real need for qualified professionals who are bilingual and multilingual and can administer those tests.
Last fall, the Department of Education introduced a new initiative to increase the number of bilingual teachers and programs available to students. They also started a pilot program to pinpoint problem districts. Alex Coletta, Columbia Radio News.
New York City's election for public advocate is Tuesday. The race will fill the seat of the former city watchdog, State Attorney General Tish James. Because this is an off-season special election, candidates aren't identified on the ballot as Democrats or Republicans. Instead, as Allie Swenson reports, candidates write their own party lines, 15 characters or less, to convey their campaign's agenda to voters.
When you go to the polls to vote for public advocate, here's what you'll see on the ballot. 16 candidate names and 16 party lines beside them.
My party line is no more delays.
Equality for all. It's time. Let's go.
That was Don Smalls, Danny O'Donnell, and Jumani Williams. They all attended a forum in Harlem earlier this week. So did Michael Blake. His party line is For the People. There are 2 Republicans in the race, but many candidates, including those 4, are Democrats. So the party lines help candidates highlight their differences. Jumani Williams wants his to remind voters of his activism.
It gets a good reaction, I say, it's time. You say, let's go. It's time. Let's go. It's time. Let's go.
candidate Rafael Espinal has a different strategy. He hopes his party line, Livable City, will hit home with voters he meets campaigning at farmers markets.
I think every time there's a conversation about anything, whether it be bike lanes, whether it be the trains, whether it be nightlife, the term making New York City more livable is always brought up.
But whose strategy is best? Douglas Musio teaches political science at Baruch College. He turns to what he says is one of the best campaign slogans out there.
We will make America great again.
Catchy, sticky, short. Whatever you think of Trump, he was a master brander. Make America Great Again was, evocative and resonated with a lot of people.
So, for the public advocate who introduces legislation and investigates city government, Musio says a good slogan should target complaints residents have about city agencies, like candidate Melissa Mark Viverito, whose party line is Fix the MTA. But University at Buffalo political scientist Jake Nyheisel says a slogan on its own won't win the race for anyone.
Campaigns tend to be won and lost regarding the fundamentals. It's name recognition, it's ballot order, it's, who turns out to vote, those kinds of big things.
Nyheisel says if he had to guess, the win will go to Jumaane Williams. People know his name. He ran for lieutenant governor last fall. But what do voters think? Ed Josie votes in Staten Island.
I've heard slogans many times in the past. Now, what's behind those slogans? How do you make these things materialize? That's the key.
Josie wants to hear more than a slogan.
Maybe hear your full story.
No matter who wins on Tuesday, like the party line they're running on, their time in office will be short. There's another election this fall. Allie Swenson, Columbia Radio News.
You can see all the candidates' party lines at uptownradio.org.
New York City's measles outbreak started in October when 6 people in Brooklyn were diagnosed with the disease. Today, the health department reported 17 new cases of measles this week. 15 of those are in one neighborhood, Williamsburg. Camille Peterson has more.
Colby lives in Williamsburg and has 2 kids. She actually didn't know about the measles outbreak, but she's not surprised.
I imagine from people that I've met that there are some anti-vaxxers, people that are against vaccination living in the Williamsburg neighborhood.
She's thinking of the anti-vaxxers that get the national spotlight, highly educated young parents who are afraid vaccinating their kids will cause health problems like autism. But in Williamsburg, measles is hitting a different group, the Orthodox Jewish community, which resists vaccination for religious reasons. Stephen Morse studies infectious diseases at Columbia University. He says measles often spreads quickly in communities that object to vaccines.
It's about 10 times more catching than the flu, and on the average, we would say that an infected individual would infect about between 15 to 20 other people.
So once one person is infected, it spreads easily through coughs, sneezes, and air particles. But it won't spread if nearly everyone is vaccinated.
Kind of hits a wall there.
Morse says there are 2 things the city should focus on. First, outreach.
Especially with the religious leaders who are very influential in those communities, finding out what the objections are and basically talking to them about the risk of measles.
And then vaccination.
Intensive efforts to set up immunization campaigns, places where people can go and get immunizations.
The city's health department issued new recommendations today for doctors serving Orthodox Jewish patients. Give kids between 6 and 11 months old an extra dose of vaccine. But Danielle, a mom of 4 who lives in Williamsburg, thinks the city should do more.
They need to make everyone get vaccinated. It don't matter what religion you are. If it's putting everybody in health in danger, everybody needs to be vaccinated.
City council members representing Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods are encouraging everyone in those areas to get vaccinated. Camille Peterson, Columbia Radio News.
You're listening to Uptown Radio.
There's more to come. Stay with us.
Beautiful and strange.
I'm Maddie Foley.
And I'm Moira Warburton. H1B visas allow foreign students to pursue higher education in the United States. The visas are handed out by a lottery system, but some students say their education shouldn't be left to chance.
I think whoever is adding value to the U.S. should be allowed to stay here.
With the Year of the Pig well underway, we'll find out how the Chinese zodiac can play a key role in family planning.
In Chinese, there's a saying that really means follow the natural course. So I think it's what the zodiac is really about. It's about fate, and you can't really change that even if I really want a cute pig baby.
These stories and more coming up. But first, these headlines.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Andrea Salcido. Venezuelan troops have killed at least one person and wounded several others today in an indigenous village near Brazil's border. This is the first act of violence in the midst of efforts to bring humanitarian aid into the South American country. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro denies there is a humanitarian crisis and opposes international aid. And at the border of Colombia and Venezuela, a fundraising effort by British billionaire Richard Branson is underway. Branson is raising money for humanitarian aid for Venezuela. Tens of thousands of people have gathered in Cúcuta. That's the town where the United States has been piling aid to ship to Venezuela this weekend. The U.S. will leave 400 of its troops in Syria. The troops will remain at a military base near the border of Iraq and Jordan. President Trump said in December that all of U.S. troops will be leaving Syria because the U.S. had won the battle against ISIS. Now, he says the U.S. can leave a small army of troops in that country. R&B singer and producer R. Kelly was charged in Illinois today with 10 counts of sexual abuse, according to a report in the Chicago Sun-Times. Multiple women accused the singer of sexual abuse in a Lifetime documentary. Kelly has denied abuse accusations in the past. The owner of NFL Super Bowl champions New England Patriots has been charged with soliciting prostitution. Authorities say they learned Robert Kraft solicited sex at a massage parlor in Florida through a sting operation. Videos show the billionaire visiting the massage parlor in 2 separate occasions to solicit sex. A spokesman for Kraft and the Patriots denied the accusations. Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman wants a new trial. Meanwhile, his sisters in Mexico want to come to see him while he serves his time in an American prison. They've asked Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador to help them get visas. For Columbia Radio News, I'm Andrea Salcido.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Moira Warburton.
And I'm Maddie Foley. Staten Island is getting a seawall, a $615 million 5-mile barrier. I spoke with Rob Freudenberg, who deals with climate resiliency in New York, about what this seawall means for New York's future in the face of climate change. So, Rob, welcome to Uptown Radio. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So what is the Staten Island seawall?
Well, the Staten Island seawall is a project that's going to build a wall across a 5-mile stretch of Staten Island's eastern shore. It will be a wall inside, essentially, a dune. So it'll be covered with sand and will have a walkway on top. And it's going to protect the area behind it up to 20 feet of storm surge.
So, I saw in the official announcement that Mayor de Blasio's office said that the Staten Island seawall can withstand a 300-year storm. What does that mean?
When someone says a 1 in 300-year storm, in people's minds, they picture that this is something that's only going to come around in another 300 years. In actuality, it's a probability of a storm occurring each year. So I think in an effort to simplify something and make it easier for people to understand, we've made people complacent about storms and then giving people a false sense of security.
Is even referring to something like Sandy as a once in a 100-year storm, or a 1 in 100 chance storm, is that even still accurate?
I think probably not going forward. I think we're going to have to recalibrate these probabilities. Science aside and research aside, I think what we need to decide as kind of a city in New York or any municipality throughout the region is what are we comfortable planning for? We know these storms are getting worse. We know they're going to become more intense. So what are we comfortable building for in the future?
So is this sort of the first seawall that New York is building?
New York City is surrounded by seawalls in a lot of different locations. What this is one of the newest seawalls and highest seawalls that we're building in the city. This is good. This is progress that we're building better things in the wake of Sandy, but there are still questions about the long term. These are built for storms, not for sea level rise flooding itself. So I think we have to figure out what do we do in the case of areas that will be permanently flooded by sea level rise. And then what do we tell the communities behind these pieces of infrastructure? How safe are they? How real are we being with that communication?
Yeah. Okay, so how safe are they?
They do actually work. I mean, against a storm, and the higher you build them, the bigger the storm they can protect against. So this is going to provide 20 feet of protection, if I read correctly what they're doing here. You picture the storm surge on Sandy; it was 14 feet or something like that. So it will protect against a very big storm. But the truth is that sea levels are rising at the same time. So, what we're protecting against today will be a higher storm surge down the line. So I think we have to be realistic and kind of say, what is the probability that this is going to be something that protects people into the future? We're buying ourselves some time. And I think the question is, what do we do with that bought time? What do we do behind the wall? Or do we continue to develop? Do we continue to allow people to think that there's safety behind the wall, or do we start planning and laying out a plan to move away from the water where you can? And that's a very tough decision that will need to be made community by community.
So February marked the beginning of the Lunar New Year. Festivities in Chinatowns across the 5 boroughs wrapped up the Year of the Dog and welcomed in the Year of the Pig. As celebrations wind down, Shannon Lin looks at how the Chinese zodiac affects birth rates in the Asian community.
It's a Sunday afternoon on Canal Street in Lower Manhattan. Grandparents are holding kids dressed in fur-lined qipaos, a traditional Chinese jacket. They're watching drummers, swinging their arms up, down, up, down, up, down. Kids are dressed in lion costumes. Some hold up papier-mâché golden pigs. 2019 is the year of the pig. Loy Luck is a mother of a 12-year-old boy born in a pig year. She says it's the luckiest animal in the Chinese zodiac.
I think that's a year of prosperity, and they are very determined, and they make lots of money, and so that's a good year.
The zodiac originated in China over 4,000 years ago. It's a 12-year cycle based on astrology that assigns an animal to each year. Each animal has its own characteristics. Now, many countries across East and Southeast Asia follow some version of the zodiac. In South Korea, for instance, there's the popular saying that girls born in the year of the horse are stubborn and disobedient. One study in South Korea found that thousands of parents lied about their daughter's birth year because they didn't want them to be born in the year of the horse.
I remember that people, when they come in, they particularly try to plan.
That's Guo Ping-zheng. She's a fertility doctor. She says that she has seen more patients in certain years, like in 2012, the year of the dragon, and in 2016, the year of the monkey.
At that time, yes, because monkey, they think the kid would be like small, and for the dragon, because it's really like powerful.
And that's why the dragon is the favorite. People born in this year are said to be the most successful. Angela Zito is an anthropology professor at NYU. She says most parents want to give their child a lucky birth date.
So when you are born is extremely important. So a gift that parents can give to their children is to hope for or try to finesse that they would be born in a good year.
China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, they've all reported baby booms, most notably in 2000 and 2012, when it was the year of the dragon. For example, Hong Kong had a 5% increase in births in 2000 alone. Parents aren't just turning to science to predict births. They're also turning to fortune tellers like Ga-Ting Xu, based in Brooklyn. Xu has seen more than 400 clients in the past 4 months. They're consulting him about having a child born in the year of the rat.
Rat babies are smarter. They are more likely to be successful in business, so many parents come to me to calculate their compatibility with each other and with the elements of the universe to see if it is a good time to have a child.
Back in Chinatown, Yuan Wang is holding her 2-year-old daughter in her arms. They're waving at the performers on the floats passing by. Wang's daughter is dressed in a pig costume, but she was born in the year of the monkey. Wang says she's hoping for a pig baby next time, but she's not going to let the stars pressure her to getting pregnant.
In Chinese, there's a saying that really means follow the natural course. So I think it's what the zodiac is really about. It's about fate, and you can't really change that even if I really want a cute pig baby.
Shannon Lin, born in the year of the pig, for Columbia Radio News.
To find out what your zodiac is, go to uptownradio.org.
President Trump tweets a lot about immigration. But in January, one of those tweets took on an unusual tone. He said he wants to make it easier for some immigrants, highly educated immigrants, to become citizens with the H1B visa. But as our reporter Lauren Lantry tells us, H1Bs are really hard to get.
Ji-yoon is in a Starbucks in Midtown, just a few minutes away from where she lives. Right next door is Citibank's wealth management office. A couple of avenues over is the Bank of America Financial Center, and there are 6 other banks within a block. Yoon works at a financial consulting firm, and this neighborhood represents her American dream.
I mean, for me, there are a lot more opportunities here that I want to do, that I want to participate in.
Yoon was born in South Korea, but she went to elementary school in Boston, Texas for middle school, and high school in Connecticut. She studied economics at Columbia University.
Basically, I'm more immersed in this culture than, my Korean culture.
Yoon has a student visa that allows her to work, but it expires next year. In order for her to stay in the country and keep her job, she needs to apply for an H1B visa.
Basically what happens is around February, your HR department will reach out to ask for all these types of documents, like your visa, copy of your passport.
Yoon will be submitting her application this April. Last year, in just 6 days, more than 190,000 people applied for an H1B. 85,000 people got one. Their names were chosen randomly because it's a lottery system.
I mean, that's a crazy number.
Michael Markovich has been an immigration lawyer for almost 37 years. He says it's always been hard to win the H1B lottery, partly because there are a ton of regulations. For example, 6,800 visas are only given to people from Chile and Singapore. Markovich says on top of all of that, in the last couple of years, the process has gotten even more difficult.
Almost 85% of all the H1Bs got this template request for further evidence, which is very frustrating.
In the last 2 years, the number of people applying has gone down by 16%. Markovich thinks that's because the process has gotten so tough, people have stopped applying.
You look at our top universities, and you'll see a substantial percentage of the students are foreign nationals. Yet, they're leaving us to go somewhere else because they're not getting the visas.
In the 1990s, 65,000 H-1Bs were created as a part of a trade agreement to allow highly educated foreign nationals to work in the U.S. Jennifer Hunt is a professor of labor economics at Rutgers University. She says the critics of H-1Bs have nicknamed them the offshoring visas.
So a company will offshore work to India, some sort of IT work, but somebody needs to liaise, and so the company in India will get an H-1B for their workers. Changing that would require reopening a trade agreement.
This trade agreement created jobs that were meant for temporary workers who had to be located in the U.S. Some of these jobs still don't exist in other countries.
Yeah, so my job doesn't exist in Brazil currently. So if I were to move back, I would just have to completely change what I do.
That's Alice Brito. She's a data analyst at an economic consulting firm. She's lived in New York for over 6 years. She's applied twice for the H-1B visa. She has one more chance. If she doesn't win this year, she has two options: move home, or her company will move her to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be hard, right? Like, I don't know anyone in Canada. Like, it's not what I signed up for.
Both Alice Brito and Ji-yoon each have a 1 in 4 chance of winning the H1B visa this April.
I'm living here, paying taxes here. I know all the lines to like the national anthem, if that's like the proof. You know, like I think whoever is adding value to the U.S. should be allowed to stay here.
Lauren Lantry, Columbia Radio News.
Strap hangers ride the subway daily without thinking much about safety. But 2 incidents on the 7 train this week have some lawmakers and commuters alike wondering what can be done to improve the MTA. Maggie Green reports.
John Mantikas works in Woodside, Queens. He used to take the 7 train to work every day, until yesterday.
I ran out, I said, "You need me to call an ambulance, and he was like, no, I'm okay.
Mantikas was sitting in the paint shop where he works when he saw a driver just miss getting hit by a falling wooden beam. An MTA spokesperson says the agency is taking yesterday's incident seriously and is conducting a full investigation. But that accident, combined with the death on the 7 train's tracks in Grand Central Station, are making Mantikas reconsider his morning route.
And I was like, I'm not taking the 7 line anymore, so I started taking the railroad, actually.
State Senator Jessica Ramos says the state needs to spend more money to make improvements for the MTA. Ramos says one of the solutions to the MTA's woes is congestion pricing, a tax on all vehicles coming into an area with heavy traffic, like Midtown.
We need to make sure that the funds are secured and can only be used for the MTA. And from there, I think we have a role to play as strap hangers to be real voices for the upgrades that we want to see.
City Council member Mark Levine agrees that congestion pricing would help diffuse the cost of updating New York City's subway system. But he says it may not be enough for what he estimates is a $40 billion job. He says the City Council may increase its contribution to the MTA's pot because safety improvements are long overdue.
We need to do what's being done in cities all over the world, which is protect passengers from falling onto the train tracks by erecting glass partitions, sliding doors.
Levine says glass doors would prevent trash from falling onto the tracks and catching fire, which he says is the main cause of delays in the tunnels. And doors would also prevent phones from falling onto the tracks, which means fewer people would jump in after them and risk getting injured. Levine says he knows the upgrade would be expensive, but other major cities around the world have already made these improvements, and New York City needs to catch up.
London's subway is older than ours, and they started to do this. The Paris system is comparable and has kind of all the same challenges of working in a dense urban environment. They started to do this.
And Mantikas, who tried to help the driver involved in yesterday's crash, says there's another option for alleviating costs: turning to commuters.
And if they need to raise the prices to make it safe and clean again, then by all means, I'm willing to pay the price for a safer MTA.
In the meantime, commuters, stay behind the yellow line and stand clear of the closing doors. Maggie Green, Columbia Radio News.
Only 6 states in the country have legislation that gives undocumented students financial aid and scholarships to attend college. New York could soon become the 7th. Governor Cuomo is expected to sign the New York State DREAM Act. The bill will allow the 4,500 undocumented students who graduate every year to get state tuition and scholarships for college. Reporter Andrea Salcido met a local student whose future college choice could be heavily influenced by this bill.
Lorena Torres is a high school senior in Queens. Like many of her classmates, she's applying to college. She got into one of her dream schools, Syracuse University, but tuition there, including room and board, is almost $70,000 a year. That means she may have to consider another school, Baruch. Tuition there is much less, a little over $20,000 a year. But Torres has a problem.
A lot of the American kids who have a lot of debt, their parents are middle class, and for us, their middle class is like being rich. For us, middle class, our middle class is their poverty.
Torres is undocumented. That means she can't apply for federal or state scholarships. According to the Pew Research Center, 1/3 of children in families with undocumented parents live in poverty.
So even if we do have to work, we are poor, and they are not.
Torres says that makes it harder for her than many of her native-born classmates. Under New York law, there are 146 undocumented public students who cannot receive New York's Tuition Assistance Program, or TAP. So Torres and her family have to pay for college out of pocket.
For me to work for school, it's like, yes, I can do it and you can do it too, but I also have like other things to take care of. Like my family, they also need help from me, and for like them, it's like at least your family can help you and help you pay for it, and I don't have those benefits. We don't really have the same opportunities.
If signed into law, the New York State DREAM Act would provide $27 million in scholarships and financial aid for undocumented students like Torres. Assemblywoman Carmen de la Rosa is the bill's sponsor.
We're punishing them by not allowing them to have access to financial aid in order to earn a degree and make better wages.
The bill was first introduced in 2013. De la Rosa hopes the money will be available for students by next fall.
We've heard the stories of dreamers who have had to work 3 and 4 jobs in order to make ends meet. And so when this young person gets to the most vulnerable part of their life, when they're about to enter adulthood and continue contributing positively to their community, they're told you can't do that here.
When my family thinks of me going to school, like they see themselves racing out of like our poverty, like they see us getting to a better place in life.
Lorena Torres, the high school senior in Queens, hasn't replied to Syracuse or Baruch yet. Until the bill is passed, she says, she is stuck. The New York State and Assembly must reach a budget agreement by April 1st for the bill to become law. Andrea Salcido, Columbia Radio News.
And that's our show. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Uptown Radio.
Our executive producer today was Sachi McClendon. Senior producer Cynthia Betubiza led our staff of reporters along with Hannah Critchfield.
Director Maggie Green coordinated our studio production with Camille Peterson and Lauren Lantry.
Our web team member Alex Coletta got this stream live to the web. Ali Swenson and Andrea Salcido produced the news. Senior editor Stephanie Horton led our copy team.
Our instructors Joanne Farron, Sally Herships, and Ben Shapiro advised our staff. I'm Moira Warburton.
And I'm Maddie Foley. Uptown Radio is live on Fridays at 4. Until next time, you can always find us at uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.